Hi everyone, I'm Nicholas Bell from Salon, Levan and Larry's, and I'm going to cook a shakshuka for you today. Shakshuka is a classic brunch dish. We used to sell many of these at Salon back in the day. Obviously the restaurants aren't open at the moment, so we're going to do a version at home. It's really just a simple tomato sauce which has a little bit of spice in it. I've got a bit of ground cumin, coriander and chilli. Also going to add some spiced roasted vegetables. We've got a bit of aubergine, courgette and green pepper. And then we're going to use that to slow cook some eggs, hopefully keep them a little bit runny in the middle. Normally you would top a shakshuka with feta cheese. I haven't got any feta cheese, but we did have some Brillat Savarin in the fridge, which is a delicious French cow's milk cheese, I think from Burgundy. So slightly different vibe, but going to put my own little spin on it. Okay, let's go and get cooking. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start cooking down the onion, the garlic and the thyme. I've got some olive oil here. I've got quite a lot of olive oil in this pan, and this is sort of medium hot. I want it sort of hot enough so it cooks relatively quickly, but I'm not trying to get lots of colour on the onions. So I'm going to throw in the onions and I'll put in, that's sort of one sort of medium size onion and 2 cloves of garlic. And then I'm going to add some thyme as well from the very beginning, and then just let that all sort of sweat down nicely. And you can see that's already starting to just bubble a little bit. Just make sure everything gets coated. I'm going to put in a little pinch of salt as well at the beginning, which is going to help to break down the onions, release the moisture so it can sort of start to saute. And then whilst I'm doing this, we're going to also toast a little bit of bread on this griddle pan. And I've just put olive oil on one side of the bread. I'm just going to let that sizzle and toast a little bit. Cool, so the bread is already getting a nice bit of charring on it. I'm going to just flip those over, and then we'll keep those warm when they're done, and I'm going to rub them with a little bit of garlic as well, and a bit more olive oil just before we finish them off. So they're fine as they are for the time being. Meanwhile, we'll get some spices into the onions. So we've got the red onion, the garlic, and the thyme sweating down nicely. We've got some dried chilli, and we've got a bit of cumin and coriander just ground up as well. You can use fresh whole seeds that you've toasted and then ground up, or just use ready ground from a packet if you like. It's not too precious, this dish. You can just kind of go with it, and then just get everything nicely coated, and you should instantly sort of start to smell those aromatic flavours coming through. When the onions are starting to get a bit sticky, it's going to be time to add the tomato sauce. I'm just going to give them another minute or so. Okay, the bread's looking great. I'm going to let that come off there and sit to the side for a sec. And then we'll add the tomatoes. Just got a tin of tomatoes. And let that bubble away nicely for a little bit. You don't want to reduce it down too much because you want enough liquid in there for the eggs to be able to slow cook, almost braise or poach. But I do want to get some of that moisture evaporated, so I'm just going to let that sit for a sec. I'm going to add a little drop of vinegar. This is a sweet sherry vinegar, so it's adding a little bit of sweetness. You could use balsamic vinegar or red wine vinegar, whatever you've got to hand really. If you're using something really sharp, like a red wine vinegar, you could add a little pinch of sugar as well. Okay, we'll just let that come to the boil for a second. Okay, and I'm just going to turn the heat down. And it's going to be time to add our eggs. I'm going to do 2 eggs per person. You can do more or less, whatever you fancy. Okay, great. So they're coming along nicely. I'm going to throw in some of these roast veg, just going to dot them in and around. These are still warm from the oven, so they're kind of good to go. But if these are cooler, if you've roasted them the day before or whatever, you could just put them into the sauce and let them warm back up in the sauce. And I'm just going to dot mine around. So we've got the courgettes, we've got the aubergine, and we've got the green pepper. And I'm just going to do a little bit more seasoning of salt and pepper on the eggs at this point. And then I'm going to use a spoon just to make sure that the eggs are nicely sort of sitting within the pan. And so you can almost kind of, if you find that there's big bits of white, you want that white to cook before the yolk, so you can sort of move the sauce around a little bit and make sure that it's all getting nicely coated. At this point, I'm going to pop a lid on, and that's going to help the eggs steam. Tend to do that rather than putting them in the oven to bake, because that really dries out the eggs and the yolks will just get really solid. So I'm going to pop a lid on now. Okay, these are going to be nice and cooked. They've been cooking for about 3 or 4 minutes now. And so they should have steamed nicely. I've had the heat on about medium, so hopefully they won't have overcooked. And we're going to add the cheese now. So they are looking really good. You can see the whites have still got a bit of a wobble, so they still need a little bit longer. The yolks are definitely still running, so that's great. Going to add our cheese, which is the Brie Savarin, as I said. If you've got Brie Savarin, then good for you. If you've got a bit of feta, that's great. You could use a little bit of natural yogurt, which you might want to add at the very end, or any hard cheese actually. It's not essential. You can keep this dairy free as well if you want, but it sort of makes it a bit more luxurious, and I had it in the fridge, so why not? Let's go for it. So that's all going in. I'm going to pop the lid back on, let it steam for another couple of minutes, by which time the eggs should be cooked. Just while that's cooking, we're going to just rub a little bit of garlic on this toast and then flash it back on the grill. So we've just got a peeled garlic clove. This is still nice and crispy. I'm just going to rub this across, which is going to give it that nice raw garlic kick, a bit like you would with a sort of crostini or something like that. We're just using, this is actually a homemade sourdough, but you could use whatever, pita bread or challah bread or brioche or whatever you fancied really. Again, it's just sort of using what we've got in the house at this point. So that's had some nice garlic rubbed across it, and then we'll pop this back on the grill just to warm it back through. Okay, so the eggs have been braising for another couple of minutes or so. I'm going to turn the heat right down. Well, you can see how all that Brie Savarin has just melted right into it. And the eggs are still just a tiny bit runny, which is great. This is coming off the heat now, but I'm just going to just top it with lots of chopped parsley. And the Brie Savarin has behaved quite differently to feta. Feta will hold its shape a lot more, but Brie Savarin's melted. It's almost going to create like a sort of cheesy tomato sauce. And then I've got some more of the dried chili flakes and the ground cumin and coriander. And that's it. Let's take it through and go and eat some lunch. So here we have a shakshuka with roasted vegetables and Brie Savarin cheese. I've been Nicholas Bell from Salon, Levan and Larry's. Thanks very much for watching. Time for lunch.